Hey everybody, Mr. Chantry here, your neighborhood planetarium director with the February 2019 edition of Evening Sky Excursions, where I show you what you can see in the sky over the Methacton community this month. So here we are in February. People always ask, why is February the shortest month, 28 days? Probably because it's really cold and nobody wanted February to last very long. It actually has to do with the Romans who set up our calendar, why it has 28 days. That's a long story, not for today. Couple announcements before we get started. Our public shows this month will be February 15th. 6:30 show will be a celebration of Black History Month called Follow the Drinking Gourd. And then our 8 o'clock show is something called Funny Thing About the Sky. It's a new format that we're trying. It's part lesson about the sky, part comedy show, and it's going to be presented by myself and my brother, Chip Chantry, who is a professional comedian, television writer, and also happens to be a former teacher. So it should be an interesting show. You can always find out about what's going on at the planetarium at our website, www.methacton.org/planetarium. We have our evening public planetarium shows here, these videos. Also, April 27th, I just got confirmation on a bunch of our dates. April 27th will be our second annual community star party at the planetarium. We're going to have lots of activities for families, kids throughout the building, free planetarium shows every half hour. And if it's clear out, we're going to have the Delaware Valley amateur astronomers outside with a bunch of telescopes out back looking at the nighttime sky. We're also going to have food trucks this year, so mark that on your calendars. Another neat thing that's on the website here is something called Spot the Station. It'll tell you when the International Space Station's coming up. One of the times that it's coming up is February 8th. And you can see it just after sunset. I have my sky set up here for February 8th. Right at about 4 o'clock as the sun is starting to set. 5 o'clock, the sun's about to go down. By 6 o'clock, the sun is below the horizon. And this is the time on February 8th that you'll want to look for the International Space Station. We're looking west to face north, where the International Space Station will be able to be seen. You want to turn about not quite a full 90 degrees to your right to see it, and it should appear over the horizon just about 6:01. Now here in my app, it's showing up pretty well here. You might need to wait until 6:02, 6:03 when it's a little bit higher in the sky to really see it. If you've seen the International Space Station before and seen it really bright in the sky, in the winter it can be a little bit dimmer because of the position of the Earth, the Sun, and the International Space Station. Sometimes it doesn't get as bright, but on the 8th, you can take a look for it. It should be in the sky for just about 6 minutes, and it'll go from the north here over to the east, and you should be able to see that. I'll back it up by a minute. Fairly high in the sky, so that's one thing to look for in our evening skies here in February. Now, not too far after that, we're going to jump here to the 10th. And on the 10th of February, you'll notice just as the sun is going down, the moon will be right by Mars. This is a good opportunity to pick out Mars and see how it's doing up there in the sky. It was at our closest to us, and it was really bright over the summer. We're starting to get further away from it now. We're about 145 million miles away from it. We've gone from our closest approach. We're getting further and further away from it now, and it's getting dimmer in the sky, but it's going to remain up there in our sky. So this is a good opportunity to see it. It'll be just up and to the right of the moon, just a few degrees. It'll stand out really easily. Now, on this night, so we're at February 10th, right after sunset. If you wait a little bit later, so that's, say, 6 o'clock, say 7 o'clock in the evening when it gets a little bit darker, with the moon right next to Mars. If you get a pair of binoculars, you can actually see something else really near Mars. And this is a perfect night to look for it because Mars is obvious because it's right next to this. But if we focus in on Mars here and we zoom in with something like a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, you'll get a little treat here. If we zoom in just to the upper left of Mars, we can see the planet Uranus. Now, Uranus was known as the magician in mythology, and some people think we named Uranus the planet here because it's technically just on the edge of what you can see without binoculars or a telescope. If you had a really, really dark sky, you might be able to make it out as a very faint star in the sky. since it's going to be so close to the moon and we have a lot of light pollution around here, there's really no chance that you're going to see it with your naked eye. But if you have a pair of binoculars and you take a look at Mars there, look to the upper left of Mars. We can see kind of this triangle formed with Mars, this star here, and then Uranus. Look for that, and then you will have seen that Uranus, the planet. It's really hard to spot, but on this night, February 10th, it'll be a little bit easier to find. So let's back out here. So that's on February 10th, just after sunset, say around 7, maybe up till 8 o'clock. After that, Mars will be getting pretty low in the sky. Then the night after that, keep your binoculars out on the 10th. Keep them out for the 11th. On the 11th, there's going to be a neat thing going on called an occultation. An occultation is when two things in space kind of pass in front of each other. And when it happens with the sun and the moon, we call it an eclipse, like what happened last month. When it's just stars and possibly the moon, we call it an occultation. This is a really neat thing that we like to do in astronomy. So on the 11th at about 8:42 at night, let me get the time set right here. At about 8:42 at night, you can see the moon pass in front of a star. Now, when we look at the moon from night to night, we know that the moon changes its position in the sky. But as it goes, it seems to just be moving with the rest of the sky. But in reality, the moon is moving slightly from the west towards the east over the background stars here. And occultations are a perfect way to prove that. If I zoom in on the moon here and we take a look at it, right here at about 8:40, let me back it up, maybe around 8:35, we can see this star right by the moon. And if you look at it with a pair of binoculars, you'll be able to probably see that star right to the left. Here, as I back us up here, let me recenter on the moon here so we can see it. As we back up time, you can see the star getting further and further away from the moon. But if you watch it right up until about 8:40, that star will still be there. Right around 8:42, it'll disappear behind the moon. That's what we call an occultation. If you really want to wait around for about an hour, it'll pop out on the other side. So it'll enter from this dark side over here, right around 8:42, and it'll stay behind the moon for about an hour. Really neat little event that you can see there in the sky. So let's back out here again. And so we used our binoculars on the 10th to see Uranus right near Mars. On the 11th, we could see an occultation, a star going behind the moon. In our evening sky here, we're full into our winter constellations. And my favorite winter constellation and most easily identifiable one is up here, Orion the Hunter. I'm going to bring up all of our constellations here so we can see them. So this is Orion the Hunter. He's high in the south when we're looking out at the sky in the month of February. His 3 belt stars stand out really, really easily. They're 3 relatively bright stars. They're pretty close together, and they're pretty much in a straight line. So really easy to pick out these. You can see the rest of him fairly easily. We also have Taurus the Bull here to the upper right. To find Taurus the Bull, what you do is you take these 3 belt stars, and you would imagine a line going through all 3 of them and going straight up, and you can see this bright star, Aldebaran here, and it has a V shape right here of Taurus the Bull. This would be the bull's horns here, and that. We can also use Orion's belt to find some other constellations. We follow the line up to find Taurus the Bull. If you follow the line down through the stars, you come to the brightest star in our northern sky, Sirius, and that's part of a constellation called Canis Major, the big dog. So Orion was a hunter, and he had hunting dogs with him. He had his big dog marked out by Sirius, sometimes called the dog star, right here. And then Procyon makes another bright star to the upper left of this, and it makes a constellation called Canis Minor, or the little dog. Now, the little dog doesn't really look like a dog. It looks like a line in the sky, but you can see it up there. That Procyon star stands out really well. Sirius, the brightest star in our northern sky, that'll stand out really, really well. And if you look in Orion, his kind of left shoulder here is a star named Betelgeuse. And Betelgeuse with Sirius and Procyon, we call these 3 together the winter triangle. They make a giant triangle in the sky that's pretty easy to identify. So you can pick those out pretty easily finding Orion there in the sky. And those, I'll put up the pictures of what people imagine they looked like years ago. Don't bother looking for Orion's unicorn, Monoceros. Impossible to see in our skies without a telescope because of all of our light pollution and things like that. But those are the constellations that you can find there in the sky. If I take all of that down, Orion's belt stands out really well. Use that to go up to Aldebaran in the V shape of Taurus the Bull, and follow it down to find Sirius the dog star and the dog constellation here. These would be the back legs and the front legs. One last thing to look at is our morning sky here in February. If we look towards the east and we go through till about 6 o'clock in the morning, if you've been getting up early, you can see lots of planets in the early morning just before the sun comes up here. I'm going to fast forward to about 6 o'clock. If you get up that early, the really bright one that you see towards the east is the planet Venus. That's the third brightest thing in our sky after the sun and the moon, so it stands out really well. In the beginning of the month, middle of the month, Jupiter will be to the right, Saturn will be to the bottom left. As we go through the month, Saturn and Venus will be getting really close together on the 17th. They'll be really close together in the morning sky. Will really stand out really well. And then at the end of the month, the moon will actually come through all of these planets here and pass by all of them as the sun is rising. So we have that. We can find Mars and Uranus in the beginning of the month. You can look for the ISS. You can use your binoculars to see a occultation of the moon going in front or occulting another star to prove that the moon is moving up there really easily. You can find those constellations of Orion, the Hunter, Taurus, the Bull, Canis Major, the Big Dog, and you can get up early in the morning and look for some of those planets like Jupiter, Venus, and Saturn. Have a great month.